Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome in to another episode of the Extra Credits Book Club podcast. I'm Dekker. That's Nightmother. We're going to talk to you about a little book called It Ends With Us.
Ugh.
It's very important that we talk to you about this book because it is not the book we're doing anymore.
No. We couldn't continue with this book. This is one of the only books I've ever DNF'd in my life, and the first book I've ever physically destroyed in my life. And fed it to my cat.
All I had to do was just like return it.
Yeah, I made the mistake of buying a hard copy. And I ripped it up page by page and threw it at Barbara, and she had the afternoon of a lifetime.
But also, like, why did we quit?
Well, as the chapters were going on, it was becoming increasingly clear to both of us, I think, that this book was an actively harmful piece of shit.
Yeah.
And talking about it was gonna be us, like, yelling into a void that possibly would ruin both of our lives. Like,
Yeah.
that's how bad it was. I've never been more viscerally upset by a book because the whole thing is that Lily falls in love with this guy who's, like, is red flags galore, right? And then it becomes increasingly more abusive to the point where one evening they're making casserole and getting a little wasted on the red wines. And he pulls out a casserole dish straight from the oven with no gloves on. And then his first thought is to beat her up. She
Yeah.
laughs at him for being a dumbass. He pushes her, she hits her face on a cabinet. And then 6 weeks later, they get married in Vegas. So it's like,
She's really just, first of all, shouldn't have laughed. It was very
no.
rude of her to laugh.
That is rude to laugh.
Second of all, she's just milking it, hitting her face on a cabinet. But truly, it was disgusting. It was grotesque. And
Yeah,
I could not, in good conscience, continue to talk about it because you're right. It would have just been us peeking our microphones because we were in, like, I would be red-faced, spitting, and that's not a discussion I want to have.
no, and genuinely for me, it was getting to a point where it was, like, legitimately triggering, and it made my life really difficult for a week because of, and for what? For
Yeah.
what? Like, I don't need, I always say if a piece of media is gonna remind me or make me revisit mentally any of the trauma that I've dealt with in my life, it better be for a good fucking reason. And there
And
was
this wasn't a good
no
reason.
need. There was no need for any
No.
of this. And my main criticism of this book is that Colleen Hoover's audience is a lot of young girls, like teenage girls are reading her books. And there are so many people, like I've seen comments on Goodreads, on TikTok, my own sisters coming out of it being like, I know that Ryle's a bad guy, but I was still team Ryle at the end of the book. And if the book was meant to serve a purpose of being a cautionary tale against abusive relationships, you have failed. If people are coming out of
Right.
this still romanticizing abusive relationships, and the guy she ends up with, her like teenage predator from when she was a child, he's no better. He's still the person who like immediately chooses violence based on his own assumptions of situations. And like it's so there's so many layers of ick. It's like the 7 circles of ick. I'm just I had no energy left to deal with reading the rest of this book. Like, I've
Yeah.
never destroyed a book in my life, and I don't know if I ever will feel the need to again, but I've never been happier to
So,
close the book
yeah.
forever on something.
So we made an executive decision to stop reading this book, and we instantly picked another one and scrambled to read. Mind you, we decided to quit this book the day before we were supposed to do the podcast on Wednesday.
Yeah. Like,
So,
mid-afternoon on Tuesday, we decided.
yeah. So we picked a new book and then scrambled to read the 14 chapters we had to get through for it to be a full episode.
Mhm.
And we picked Jade City by Fonda Lee. And if you guys don't mind,
Mhm.
I'll read you the synopses.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The Call family is one of 2 crime syndicates that control the island of Kekon. It is the only place in the world that produces rare magical jade, which grants those with the right training and heritage superhuman abilities. The Greenbone clans of honorable jade-wearing warriors once protected the island from foreign invaders, but nowadays, in a bustling post-war metropolis full of fast cars and foreign money, Greenbone families like the Calls are primarily involved in commerce, construction, and the everyday upkeep of districts under their protection. When the simmering tension between the Calls and their greatest rivals erupts into open violence in the streets, the outcome of this clan war will determine the fate of all Greenbones and the future of Kekon itself. Jade City by Fonda Lee. It sounded interesting. We picked it. We read the first couple chapters, and it was like a new life had been breathed into us.
Yeah, it was like a healing balm after the on fire garbage can of
Yeah,
Colleen Hoover's nightmare.
yeah, truly. We changed the title.
Oh yeah, good call.
Since the joke is over now, the ruse has been accomplished. There. This is a fantasy book that takes place in a very nebulous, modernish day
Yeah, I
because
know it's
it
sorry.
gives vibes like 1930s China, but also kind of modern day China, specifically
Yeah,
Hong Kong.
yeah, and also kind of like 70s a little bit.
Yeah, and like there's often mentions of car type, like car makes and models, except it's made
Mhm.
up. So you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah,
But
it's a really richly described world immediately, and we're kind of given things in tidbits, and we are shown and not told,
yeah,
which is such a change. Like, I think about Kingdom of the Wicked and how there
we're
was
told everything.
absolutely yeah, and outside of that, there was no world building. Like, they
Right.
were just in an isolated little village with, like there there was so much potential to describe a world, and none of it was realized, and, like, there's terms and, like, principles and political parties, and everything exists, but we're just kind of fed information, like, we're, like, drip fed it over the
Yeah.
course of the book.
Like we are part like the book does this thing that very few fantasy novels do anymore, which is operate under the assumption that you live here.
Yeah.
So they're like, we don't need to explain this shit to you. But and like I read recently that one of the like stop writing prologues, right? Because everybody has to have a prologue in front of their book, and prologues are just there to info dump early so they don't have to creatively explain to you the context.
Mm-hmm.
And this book, which probably could have used a prologue, doesn't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, anyway, here you go. Good luck. You're going to figure it out as you go.
Yeah. And I actually really appreciated that because some fantasy worlds or science fiction worlds that throw you into the universe without a prologue do it in a way where they still info dump and they give you
Yeah.
so many names, like with Legend of the Galactic Heroes, for instance. Like that prologue was it was interesting and well articulated, but it was an info dump of the entire history of the galaxy up
Right.
to that point. And
And to a degree, it was required, but it was just like,
oh
all right,
yeah.
have a seat, my son. Let me tell you everything that's been happening.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it worked that this one doesn't have a
Yeah.
prologue, but it's still a bit kind of like discombobulating getting thrown into a world where you're trying to figure out what names mean and like why people are talking about Jade and what this restaurant was. Like you're kind of your mind is like building the world in your head as you're getting the names and all of the information sorted out. But it's not I didn't feel like it was done in an overwhelming way.
No, no, because the first chapter literally starts with a couple of boys who are working at this place called the
Twice lucky.
Twice Lucky
It's like a diner.
restaurant or something.
Mhm.
And the way it's described, I can see it in my eye,
Mhm.
where everybody's just kind of vaguely sweaty, super like from all of the humidity, it's just murky in there.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of like gangsters at the bar hanging out, and you can tell because they're dressed nicer than everybody else. And they're like kind of in the kitchen, but peering around the corner of the kitchen, staring at one of these gangsters in particularly. And you're just like, hold on a minute, give me a second, what's happening?
Yeah. Who are you guys?
And we're introduced to a guy who's got he's an older one. He's like a grandpa gangster,
Yeah.
and he's got jade earrings. And apparently, they know this guy has been coming into the it's Twice Lucky a lot, and just getting hammered.
Mhm.
So they're like, okay, we've got a plan. We're gonna spike his drink, and we're gonna steal his earrings. We're like, okay. So far,
Why?
Jade has not been explained to us.
No, just that, like, it's something people want, like,
Yeah,
or
they
that
want it
these
real
2
bad.
boys want. Because like, the first line in the book says, like, "The would-be jade thieves," and then goes on to describe the rest of what's happening, and so you're like, "Jade thieves? Like, why do we care about Jade so much?"
Yeah,
And we don't find out yet.
not quite, but you can definitely tell that it's something people really want.
Yeah.
So they spike this guy's drink, and apparently he can really hold his liquor because it takes a really long time for
Yeah,
the
like, all
drugs to hit
night.
him. Then he goes into the bathroom and does his little barfing thing, and then passes out.
Yeah, and the way that, like, him puking was described made me almost gag in public because I was out for a walk while I was listening to this, and it was like the way she describes it is that you can just, like, smell it. Like,
Oh yeah,
she describes it as, like, booze-soaked vomit or something like that, and
yeah.
it's just like, oh, and you know it's just, like, hot in there and disgusting, so he's throwing up, and then he passes out, and these 2 boys descend on him like little vultures, and they're trying to pry he's got, I think, 3 in each ear, and they're trying to pry it out, but they've been in his earlobes for so long that the skin's kind of grown around it. And so for like the final one that they're trying to get out, it's really stuck in there. And the guy's like, just go for it. Just get it out. Like, we have to leave this place and get out of here. And he wakes up when they get the last earring
Yeah.
out, and like chaos ensues, basically.
Yeah. They get the last one out and they stuff all of them into like a brown paper bag
Oh, yeah.
and then decide to make a break for it. And this is when we find out what Jade does. Because as soon as he's got the
Right.
bag in his hand, he starts feeling weird.
Yeah, it's
He's
like
like,
he's coming up on
whoa.
something.
He can hear things a lot clearer. He can see way better. As he's like running out of the bathroom, people are trying to catch him, but they're way too slow. They're like,
Yeah.
stop. And he's like zooming his way out of the restaurant when he gets absolutely clotheslined by someone else. I forget who it was specifically.
Is it the old guy, or is it someone else, or is it Hilo?
It might be Hilo or his Make brothers.
Oh, yeah, right. One
But
of these
either way,
somebody.
yeah. He's like running around the corner in his little super speed and he just gets clobbered and like does a backflip onto the ground and they're like,
Yeah.
haha, nice try, punk. And I think that's kind of where the first chapter ends.
Yeah, like these kids are coming up on Jade like they just took ecstasy at a concert, and like, but it's giving them all these superpowers. And then the kid, so these two would be Jade thieves are Barrow, who's the one coming up on the Jade drugs, and Sampa, I think. And I don't does Sampa get affected by Jade, or is he just kind of there?
No, I forget what the culture he is.
But he's not like a native to the island, and only
Yeah.
that culture
And
are the
that,
people who like experience Jade in that particular way.
right. Barrow is Kekonese
Mhm.
and they are inherently vulnerable to it, is for lack of a better word. Like it
Yeah,
works really well on them, but his friend Sampa, who I forget the name,
I know, me too. It starts with an
an A,
A, yeah.
but that particular race, culture.
Ooh, I might have it actually. I have the character list.
Oh, right.
Abuke?
Yeah, Abuke.
Mhm.
They are just like flat out. It does nothing to them. They can't do anything with it. It doesn't like super juice them. It's just like Jade is in real life to them. Just a
Mhm.
rock. But yeah, I think that's the end of chapter 1 where they just get like
Yeah.
clotheslined. And Hilo's like, man, you stupid old codger.
Right, yeah, because, we start getting fed some kind of, like, hierarchical terminology about how these, like, clans are
Yeah.
organized. So this chapter is called The Horn of No Peak, No Peak being the clan of this family who we're getting introduced to, and the Horn is, like, a very high-ranking position
It's
where he's
like a
essentially just like the muscle, like, but
there's fingers, which are the lowest tier.
mhm,
They're like muscle.
yeah,
And then there's fists, which are like I'd say like lieutenants. And then the horn is like the captain, but there's only one of them.
right,
But he runs all the street level stuff. Like he
yeah,
handles all the fists and all the fingers. And then above him is the pillar,
right,
which just so happens to be his brother. But
yeah.
in this chapter, oh, and Hilo, to kind of like put it into perspective for how different people, like how everybody wears their jade differently.
Right.
Like that guy had earrings, and Hilo has it's like a necklace, but it's all embedded into his collarbone,
Yeah.
which
And
would
other people,
it would make it so much harder to steal.
yeah, because a lot of people wear it as like bracelets or like belts, like very
Mm.
easily snatchable accessories. And some people just straight up embed it into their body.
Yeah, which to me, smart move.
Yeah, that seems like a no-brainer. But, they catch these thieves, and we meet these brothers, the Make brothers, Tar and Ken, and
Yeah,
they're the first and second fist of No Peak, so they're kinda like Hilo's cronies,
yeah, they're like his
basically.
right hand men
Yeah,
or left
and,
hand men.
yeah, and, like, there's a bit of a power struggle conversation, I think, between Hilo and Shunju, who's the old drunk guy.
Yeah,
And he's like, "Just fucking keep an eye on your jade, sir." And this like, the old dude is, like, yelling for punishment, and the restaurant owner's like, "Please don't kill them here, like, go outside." I just all the business owners who, like, have to deal with these families getting into, like, different violent encounters in their establishments are
yeah,
just, like, so tired.
yeah.
They're like, "Please, just anywhere, take it outside, I'm begging you."
Mr.
And,
Mr. Une, I think, the lantern man of this particular establishment, which is a term that we won't get explained to us for another like 2 chapters,
yeah.
which is great. I love that kind of shit.
Yeah,
When they're
same.
just like, "Oh, he's the lantern man of this
Yeah.
establishment," and I'm like, "Hmm? Excuse
Cool.
me? Say more." But yeah, he's like, "Whatever you guys do, don't kill him here, please. We're trying to run a business, and murder inside this place would really put a damper on that."
Mhm.
So they just take him out to the back alley and beat the ever-loving Christ out of these two boys.
Yeah, and we also get a bit more information about, like, how one obtains jade and how it's like, they're like, "You idiots, like, you can't just take it from somebody." Like, the way that you actually harness the powers of the jade or to, like, through blood and training and clan make you like, those are the things that make you a jade warrior, not, like, stealing it from a drunk old man. So, it's like, im we're given a little bit more information about, like, the ritual surrounding acquiring jade and, like, the significance it has not only through, like, the powers it gives you, but, like, how you get it given to you as well.
I would say that's true, but I think that was a very propaganda-y answer because
Oh.
when he when Barrow had it, he instantly started becoming Captain America.
True, but you still need, like,
Sure, you do
the
need to be
training.
trained to effectively use it, but he was making
Yeah,
it seem like it won't do anything unless you're a very special boy who went through the academy.
right. That's a good point.
And they essentially like beat because Barrow had been clobbered into unconsciousness. So they were really putting the squeeze on Sampo. Like, what are you gonna do with it, huh? Punk? And he was like, well, we were gonna give it to the new like Cutter or something like that.
Carver, I think.
Carver. Yeah, because they were said that the old one that everybody knew and that No Peaks relied on died.
Or, like, just disappeared mysteriously,
Yeah, and this
and
new
he
guy
was like a
turned up.
yeah, now he's kind of like a jade fence, but he is one of those, like, no questions asked, "Bring me any jade you find." It can be from the river, it can be raw, it can be stolen from somebody. Just give me as much as you can find, and I don't care where it comes from, and I won't ask you where you got it.
Yeah, some hard cash.
And I think it's, like, insinuated that this dude killed the old guy, like, the other Carver.
Yes, I think it's outright said.
Oh, okay.
I think.
You're probably right.
Um, but then they stick the two boys in a car And they're like, you're gonna go tell this directly to the pillar himself. And that's the end of chapter 2.
Mhm.
It feels like the chapters aren't terribly short. They're about 20 to 30 minutes long a piece. But the prose is so rich that explaining what happens in them takes no time at all.
Yeah, but reading, like, the way it's described is just, like, so wonderfully sensory, like, everything about like, in the beginning of chapter 3, for instance, like, we learn about Lon, who's the pillar, and we
Mm,
get a little bit more information about, like, how somebody who has, like, this long-standing relationship with Jay that has it, like, on their body at all times, kind of experiences the world, like, he's having a hard time sleeping, so he steps outside into the backyard of his home, and, like, the scene described of, like, the nighttime and how he can, like, hear all the insects and, like, feel the individual blades of grass in the yard and, like, the particular qualities of, like, the wind blowing through, but the way it's
yeah.
described is so lovely.
Yeah. Like, I know we just started talking about this book, but please go read it.
Yeah, it pulls you in immediately, and I don't I think it's partially because like, we've been reading some shit, but
Yeah, we've
also,
been
like
reading absolute trash.
and, like, even in my spare time, I've been reading trash. Like, I was seeking comfort in the arms of, like, Sarah J. Maas after reading this fucking other book. But just diving into this book is just, like, a cool bath. Like, it's so nice.
Yeah. And I think chapter 3 is also where we find out that Jade is like the one object on this planet that is impervious to being culturally appropriated
Right.
because nobody can use it other than Kekonese.
Mhm.
And like there's allusions to like they suggest or hint to an invasion from another country that was happening, and it reminded me a lot of like Bajoran resistance from Star Trek
Mhm.
because everything they were describing was like, oh my god, this is exactly like what the Bajorans had to do. They were basically like hiding out in the mountains, and Lon's dad used to be a resistance, like the resistance fighter,
Mhm.
because he harnessed Jade and absolutely beat the shit out of all the white people,
Right.
and he became the ultimate hero of all.
Mhm.
Uh, but they like were invaded so that they could use Jade, and then they found out that they can't. Like they can hold it, and it'll get
Mhm.
them like high or a buzz or make them feel cool, but it doesn't
Yeah.
give them like Superman powers.
No, all they can really do with it is, like, put it into a little face roller, like your little gua sha tools, and just
Uh-huh.
incorporate it into your skincare routine. That's about it.
Infused face mask.
Yeah.
And then I think the weatherman shows up. He's like, "What are you
Yeah.
doing outside?"
Mhm.
Because Lon was a little nervous. He's nervous for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah,
Like
he's an anxious
he's just
boy.
uneasy
Yeah. I mean, I
because
get it.
because he recently got handed the pillar position.
Mhm.
His grandfather, who was the pillar before, and also like the hero of Kekon,
Mhm.
and he recently retired and was like, okay, now you're in charge of the company. And everyone's like, oh, this new guy's in charge? Okay. And now
Mhm.
he's like anxious about this, so he's not sleeping, and he's like, oh god, they're gonna think I'm unwell because I'm not sleeping, so I'm
Right.
unfit to rule. It's like, man, my man, be just chill. Just
Yeah.
relax. Take a few breaths.
But we're getting a like, you get the vibe that, like, his grandfather is one of those people that would retire, but people would still turn to him for, like, the
Yeah.
ultimate ruling. So he's dealing with, like, that shit, and then he's also contemplating, like, I really need to figure out a way to get my weatherman to retire gracefully because he is ultimately loyal to my grandfather, and he's got some pretty yikes views on some things, and is like he's one of those. His name's Doru, and he's been around Lon since he was a child and always
Right.
uses really, like, overly familiar names for him.
Mm-hmm. And he also does this really undermining thing where anytime Lon makes a decision about the business or the family, the business. I
Mhm.
mean, it's a crime family. It's the business. Capital T, capital B.
Yeah.
Anytime he makes a decision about it, uh Doru is like, have you asked your grandfather first? And it's like, man, fuck you. Get this guy out of here, man.
Yeah, and at first, like, as he's like, you're I was kind of not sure why Lon would want Doru to retire because we've like, he's so loyal, he's been in the family
He's
forever.
loyal to his grandfather.
That's true, but he's been a great weatherman, like, great track record, and the weathermen are kind of like the strategist and chief advisor and kind of also like the CFO and, like, yeah, the number 1
Yeah,
advisor
they
to
they
the killer.
handle they handle like they're like the political advisor and the financial guy to a degree, even though they've got a lot of financial men.
Mhm.
He's just like the chief advisor, right hand man.
And kind of like the Oberstein to Reinhardt's,
Yeah,
like, ruling position, basically.
but like it's when you had told me that you were team Doru from the start, I was like, no, right away I knew that guy was trouble.
I know. Well, I was like, I didn't know. I wasn't. I didn't feel like I had enough information about Lon because the way Lon describes himself is kind of unreliable. Like,
Yeah.
because we're kind of this chapter's told through his perspective, and he's fussing and fretting about not like being unwell, being anxious, and then being like, I need people to be loyal to me. I need this guy to retire. And I'm like, but why? Like, why? What's the reason for this? Is it only because you want somebody who respects you more? Like, or do you think he's been in the position too long? I didn't feel like I had enough information. I was like, why would you get rid of somebody who's been around this long and knows the business really well and is clearly still showing up every day, eager and ready to do the job that he's been asked to do?
Yeah.
But then as it goes on, you find out, like, oh, he's very antiquated in his views.
It wasn't even that. It was because I really like politicking and I like scheming. So I am acutely aware of the telltale signs of scheming. And the way he talked to him and constantly brought up his grandfather, I was like, this guy is like, he is the last remaining puppet string that his grandfather has to running everything.
Right.
And Lon wants to cut those strings so that it will be his. And this guy just keeps undermining almost everything he does, which
Mhm.
makes him less confident in his ability to do his job as Pillar, which leads to Lon's insecurities and lack of confidence.
Mhm.
And we don't even know if he's a bad guy. But
Doru?
yeah.
Right. I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he's just
Well, I've got my reservations about him. I think because we'll get to it.
okay.
But Hilo turns up with the two boys in his truck, and he just kind of like pours them out onto the road in front of him, and he's like, "Tell him what you told us," and they tell him about this new carver in town, and Lon's just like, "Okay, bye."
Yeah. But he lets like he gets information about the carver and then basically just lets the boys go.
Hmm.
And I feel so bad for Sampa because he's like, I didn't even really want to be here. Like, please just let me go. This will be the worst thing I ever do in my life. Let me go home, please. Like, I
Yeah.
promise I'll never I won't even think about Jade for the rest of my life. I just wanna go home and be a good boy and live a good life, and, um, Hilo can tell after those kids run off that, like, Barrow has gotten a taste for Jade, and he's like, "I'm only gonna have to find and kill this kid later,"
Yeah.
because he's good. All he's gonna care about now is getting his next fix, basically.
Yeah, because apparently it gives people the itch. The itches.
Well, that's if you have too much too soon. So, yeah, I guess I don't know, did he have too much?
We don't know. It's hard to measure a rock
Yeah, and it's like,
in
is that
dosage.
yeah, and like, I'm still a little confused about how that aspect of it works. Is it, like, withdrawal related? Is it, like, you just overdo it immediately and then
Well,
I don't know.
they make it seem like it's like withdrawal related or overdose related, like a drug. But then at the same time, they also make it seem like if you are not the right heritage, all it will do is fuck you up.
Yeah, or if, like, your family has some type of, like, predisposition to, like, mental illness, basically. Like,
Yeah.
or
Like even if you're a mixed race person, it might fuck you up. And even if you are the correct race, it can still like it's just really picky,
it's very complicated.
which is what the academy is for.
Right. But Hilo thinks that the new Carver, I think his name is Tembem, and he thinks he's being funded by kind of like their rival crime family, the Mountain Clan. And Hilo's convinced that Ait Madashi, who's the adopted daughter of the last pillar of the family, Ait Ugantin, I think.
Oh.
Um, and he thinks that she has something to do with this, like, that she's behind this new Carver taking over, and then Doru kind of, like, appears out of the fog, and he's, like, very skeptical about this. He's like, "I don't know, like, why would the pillar of the Mountain Clan concern herself with, like, basically a fence for Jade? Like, why would she stoop to caring about that kind of stuff?"
Right.
Um, but during these conversations, like, Hilo and Doru are basically kind of like the next level down from Lon, and they're so different in how they approach problem solving and the solutions that they're trying to suggest. But we find out as well that, like, people like the Kekonese have like jade auras, and they all have like a very distinct aura with how, like,
Yeah.
the way jade affects them appears to other people, and I think Hilo's is described as, like, bright liquid in comparison to Doru's thick smoke,
Yeah.
and I really liked that. I think that's so neat.
Yeah. But it that's another moment when I was like, I don't know about this Doru guy. Because Lon was talking to Hilo about like the Carver could be part of the mountain just to destabilize business. And out of nowhere, Doru's like, that might not be true. And I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
that's a good point.
Nobody fucking asked you, old man. Also, why are you taking their side? Thought you worked for me.
That's a good point.
But he also decides it's time to talk to the old man. Because he wants to get rid of Doru.
Mhm.
Excuse me. He wants to get rid of Doru, and he wants such a bonehead move. He wants to go ask permission if he can get rid of Doru.
It's very weird. It's like he's trying to avoid conflict, but in going to his grandfather, like, you just know that it's gonna create a worse situation than if he just
Yeah,
told Doru to get the fuck out and retire.
because based
Um
on everything he's told us about his grandfather, who respects strength and willfulness,
Yeah.
to go to him and be like, "Oh, granddad, can I fire your best friend?" He'd be like, "You weak piece of shit, get out of my sight."
"Fight
But
me, bitch."
if he had just fired him and then went to his grandfather and said, "I got rid of him,"
Mhm.
he'd be like, "All right."
Yeah.
If that's
I
what you
mean,
think
he
is
wouldn't
best.
well, I don't think he'd be that happy about it. I think he would still be a piece of shit about it, but maybe not try and, like, beat him up at
He'd
the same
respect
time.
it at least.
True, even if he didn't like it. But there's one more thing before we go to the next chapter where this chapter introduces us to the concept of a stone eye, which is essentially somebody
Oh
of like
yeah.
Kekonese descent. It's like a squib in Harry Potter, basically, where it's like you're born from magical parents, but you don't have magic.
Oh,
It's kind of like you're born from this family that can like harness and use the powers of Jade, but it doesn't affect you at all.
right. Came out as a dud.
Yeah.
That would be me. I would
Why?
be I would be the one because it's just my luck.
This is a fantasy world, though. You could say whatever you want.
True. But he goes up to his grandfather's like he's full of like piss and vinegar. Like he's like, "Ooh, I'm going to tell my grandfather off." And
Yeah.
then the instant he goes in there, he's like, "Uh, uh hey,
Hello?
uh, grandpa?"
They call him Granda, which is like that seems very
Weird.
it threw me.
And
Oh, but we haven't said that people like the Kekonese who can harness and use the powers of Jade, they're called green bones,
right.
which is important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is important. It's
Um
just a name.
it's just used constantly.
Yeah.
Uh his grandpa's like up in his study or in his room staring off into nothing. And I think he starts talking to Lon as if he's his dad,
Yeah,
which
because I
is
think he's
disrespectful as hell because he knows what he's doing. Because his
Wait,
dad
you
was
think
like,
he's, like, faking dementia?
I think he was, because as soon as Lon starts talking shit and like, I want to do this and that and the other thing, he snaps out of his reverie and starts being awfully lucid. So I think he was just being an asshole because his dad was this big badass tough guy and
Really?
Lon isn't so much that, at least in his eyes. So he's like, "Oh, it's my strong son. Come to see me, eh?" And he's like, "It's not me, it's your grandson." He's like, "Oh, right."
I didn't pick that up,
I don't trust
but I'm
anybody in this
not
book.
I clearly but that's good. I'm just taking everything at face value, like, "Yeah, this makes sense." But, but I don't think
He's so
it's
conniving, though.
he is, but I don't think he would fake dementia.
Oh
Would he?
no. Yeah, of course.
I
He runs a
but
criminal empire,
like,
and
but he also values strength, and I don't think he
he's not a
would if
Klingon.
he was no, but I don't think he was gonna view dementia as, like, his tactical advantage. Like, he has too mu his ego is way too high
Right.
to do
But
something like that.
the reason why, and I guarantee you, the reason why he's like he essentially berates and like dares Lon to keep Doru is because Doru tells him everything, so he can still continue running things.
Right.
And that's cunning and conniving and just generally shitty. Like, don't retire if you're gonna fucking do this shit, old man.
Yeah, but it is important to note that, Lon is, like, the spitting image of his dead father,
Right.
and he used to really relish being compared to him as a kid because he didn't know anything about his father besides the fact that he came to visit like once a month, had great stories, and then disappeared again.
Yeah.
Um, and now he hates it because he wants to be his own boy. He wants to
Yeah.
like, and like I would fucking hate that too. I hate it when somebody even tells me I vaguely resemble one of my parents, which like of course I'm gonna because they're my parents. But I'm like I'm my own person. Like I don't. I'm a unique snowflake. I don't want to be compared to anybody. But now, like, he's looking around the walls in his grandfather's apartment or, like, little penthouse area, and it's, like, all these accolades and then pictures of his dad and, like, no pictures of anyone else, basically.
Yeah. And he he starts talking about how he wants to make like lawn. It's like, I'm thinking about making some changes to personnel. And he essentially wants to build his own cabinet, which a leader should do.
Mhm.
And his grandfather's like, "Oh, what's the matter? You don't like the ones you've got?" And he's like, no. I mean, they're fine. They're okay. You know what? I'll use them. It's fine." And he's like, "Did you want to get rid of them or not? Make up your mind, you baby."
Yeah. Yeah, they have a conversation before they get into it that has nothing to do with the reason Lon showed up, and Lon decides when he gets there that he doesn't actually wanna have the conversation, and his grandfather's like, "What did you wanna talk about again?" He was like, "Oh, it's fine, like, I'll just go." And he's like, "How?" He's like, "No, you don't, you fucking leave, like, you're the pillar, you don't wait."
Yeah, it's like the typical manipulative dad energy,
Mhm.
where they trick you into like saying what you mean and then they berate you for saying what you mean.
Yeah, and, like, encouraging and demanding that you be somebody that they're not allowing you to be,
Yeah,
basically.
that's exactly it. And then they start fighting. Literally
Yeah,
fighting.
literally
Because
fighting.
he's like, let's see how tough you are then. Big man, you want to change your cabinet? Let's see how tough you are then. He's like, "Come on, Grandpa, I'm not gonna fight you." And the dude springs up out of his fucking wheelchair and just BOW! And just lays an ass whooping on him. And Lon starts defending himself and like cracks one on his grandpa's face. And Grandpa does the oh thing, and he's like, "Oh my god, Grandpa, I'm so sorry." And he's like, "Fucking gotcha!" And he hits him again. And it fell for the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah, knocks him to the ground and, like, towers over him like he's the war hero of old that he used
Yeah,
to be.
it reminded me of remember the dad in Hot Rod,
Yeah.
where he's constantly berating his son to fight him, and then when he
Mhm.
does, he's like, oh god, and he's like, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit," and then that's when his dad gets like the free hit on him.
Yeah,
It's the same thing.
totally the same dynamic. One of the details I really liked about this interaction, though, was this idea that his grandfather's getting way too old to wear as much jade as he is, but he refuses to
Yeah,
relinquish any of it.
the dude's decked out like a like a turquoise grandma from Arizona.
Yeah, exactly.
Got a belt. He's got bracelets on. He's probably got a necklace,
Bandoliers.
rings.
Maybe a little tiara. You never know.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what happens in chapter 5. I have notes here, but I don't remember where it starts.
It's basically well, one more thing from chapter 4, they mention Shay, Lon and Hilo's sister,
Yes.
and he's like, she's wanting to come home, and the grandfather's like, who she was clearly his favorite,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Oh, is she still dating that other bitch from another culture?" Like, just being super racist about it. And Lana's like, "Oh, no, they actually broke up." And he's like, "Good." And that's about it. But the only thing we need to remember from that section is that they have a sister, her name is Shay, and she's coming home.
Yeah. And
Um,
everybody's kind of like put off by the fact that she ran away with a white guy. Ugh.
yeah.
Named
Chapter 5,
Gerald.
yeah, Gerald, of all things.
Ah.
Um, I think chapter 5 is just Hilo going to visit Wen, and it's just, like, them fucking the
Oh.
whole time.
Yeah. I forgot. This is the sex chapter.
Yeah, it's like
And
20 minutes.
one of the most aggressive uses of the word cock I've ever heard.
Yeah, I was in a grocery store when I was listening to this chapter, and I was, like, looking around being like, "Oh my god, can other people hear what I'm listening to right now?" But, I mean, all we get from this is that Hilo's in love with
Yeah, he's got a honey.
Tar and Ken's sister,
Oh yeah.
and she's a stone eye, and he loves that about her because he knows that her attraction and love for him is based purely off of how she feels about him as a person and not the jade that she might steal from him later. Um, and she is basically like, "How many of the fists do you have that you can actually trust? Like, how many men do you have working with you who you trust implicitly?" Because like if like I could be one of your fists, he's like, "No, no, no, like that's not for on you to do. I just want you to be like the person I come home to at the end of the day." And he starts complaining about Lon being like a weak little baby, and he's like, "I don't envy the fact that he has to deal with our granddad and Doru, that old fuck." And she basically is at the end just like, "Why don't you go to the academy and there's going to be a group of people graduating from there soon. So like go get like take a vibe check and see if there's any guys out
Yeah.
there that like
Go
you'd
scope
want
out
to
the talent.
recruit." Yeah. That's pretty much it. But
Yeah. But it's
and
important to note, and it's the sex scene in this chapter is super vulgar. Like words are used that I was like clutching pearls, and yet it was still more tasteful than any
yeah.
of the sex scenes in that god awful book we threw away.
Yeah, I know. I had a feeling that's what you were going to say cuz that's exactly what I was thinking when I was listening to it. I was like, this is a lot, but it's
Yeah.
not Ryle like fucking raw
Fucking
dogging
two pump chump over
Lily.
here.
Yeah, for 3 seconds on a couch.
Ugh. Anyway,
Chapter 6.
I think this is where we're introduced to Shay.
Mhm.
And my first note was, um, she kind of goes into explaining that she left the family. She wanted to strike it out on her own. She wanted to go live her life with Gerald.
Gerald.
And I was like, okay, but why? Like, out of spite? There was no, like, she was loved in the family. It's not like anybody treated her bad. She just wanted to be like
Yeah.
the rebellious teen.
Yeah, she wanted to do like a semester abroad, I think, but it turned into like 2 years abroad. And honestly, my takeaway is that she just wanted like her family didn't approve of the guy she was dating, so she wanted to get away from her family for a little bit.
Yeah.
That's probably about it. But she's been in somewhere called Espenia, I think,
Yeah.
and
Who
like left.
knows what kind of allegory? Like, the names of the countries that are mentioned in this book, I'm just like, I have no idea what those are supposed to be.
Like my best guess is like this universe's version of like Europe. Like
But every
maybe?
other country they talk about could be Europe.
True.
It's super weird. It's
Yeah.
not like in Guy Gavriel Kay's like Al Rasan universe where you can kind of pinpoint what that fake country is supposed to be.
Mhm.
Like Esperania,
Spain.
you don't have to be a genius to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Or Batiara
Mhm.
is, I imagine, just kind of like Greek.
Yeah, it was like Greece or Turkey or something in that area.
Yeah. But anyway, she is she coming home or is she just getting home? Like she just arrives in town again.
Yeah, she's at the airport. She's been on a 13-hour flight. Um, and I think she basically just like is getting out of a breakup, and
Yeah.
that's why she decided to come home. I think Lon also asked her to come home. Um, but I could be wrong because I have a question mark after that note.
I
So
don't remember hearing that, but
okay.
it could
Sh
be true.
The
Um,
important thing is she's coming home and she is on her way. She does the thing, in, like, in the, like rich white woman movie where they get into a cab at the end of the movie and the cab driver's like, "Where to?" And she's like, "Home." And then
Yeah.
says no other information.
But I also want to point out that she gets off the plane and then goes to the call estate. And she's like, "Hi everybody, I'm here again." And they're like, "Great, welcome back." And even Grandpa's like, "I forgive you." And she's like, "Fuck you, I didn't do anything wrong."
Yeah.
Uh and Lon is like, "Are you gonna stay here at the house?" And she's like, "No, I'm gonna strike it out on my own." And he's like, "All
Mm.
right, cool." And then the next bit of the chapter is her trying to find an apartment and a job. And she's like, "This is really hard because I can't just call my brothers to do it for me."
Yeah.
And I was like, all this huffing and puffing about striking out on her own, and then without nepotism, it's much too hard.
She's complaining the whole time. She's like, "God, how long am I actually gonna, like, commit to this plan? Like, this I know this would be so much easier if I just took family help."
And that's the moment I knew, okay, she'll be brought back into the organization in no time.
In, like, 2 weeks flat, easy.
And then I think Hilo comes to visit her, and he's like, "What are you doing in town? Miss Too Cool for School."
Mhm. Yeah, but her and Lon have, like, a little conversation first, and we get a bit more information about, like, their mother. Um, and she's kind of like this the first time we're getting to see Lon through the eyes of somebody who actually understands and cares about him,
Yeah.
and, not just him, like, worrying about his ineffective abilities to lead.
Yeah.
And she's like, "God, he's really had to shoulder a lot of this by himself." Like, oh, with his wife leaving, which is something that his grandfather, like, mocked him about before he beat him up.
Oh,
He was like, "This
yeah.
is why your wife left, you weak bitch." And, like, she left him for another dude, like, so he's been dealing with that, and then, uh, hi I mean, their grandfather's declining health, which may or may not be true,
Well, I think his
and
health is declining. I just think he's overselling how much mentally he's gone.
and, his unwillingness to, like, relinquish the jade that he has, so he's dealing with a lot, and we're getting more glimpses of, like, the amount that he's dealing with, but
Yeah, and he
their
just kind of
mom
goes, "Don't worry about it. I'm
yeah,
fine."
he's doing the thing where you just take on more and more things, and, you feel the panic starting to rise, and you still keep saying yes to things until you get to the point where you're like, "I'm having a panic attack, and I may die."
Y- um, I don't remember the kind of the conversation that her and Hilo have. I just know that he's kind of like, "Ooh, look what the cat dragged in." And she's
Yeah,
like, "It's kind of confrontational, but it also isn't. It's just
yeah,
it's the kind of confrontational where Hilo's clearly more hurt than he lets on that she left in the first place.
yeah.
And she's angry that he's angry."
And she's also feeling like she's showed up, like, unprepared at her high school 10-year reunion, basically, like,
Yeah.
because her and Hilo have always they're closer in age, they've always had this kind of, like, sibling rivalry, and she's gone away and kind of left the family business and her jade behind, and now she comes back, and Hilo has been promoted through the ranks, he's, like, a very high-ranking member of the family, he has a lot of power, a lot of people working under him,
Yeah.
and she's, like, I wouldn't say she's intimidated by it, but she's definitely jealous, and she's sizing herself and her accomplishments up to what Hilo's done, and Hilo does the thing that their grandfather does where he's like, "I forgive you for leaving," but when she left, he's, like, conveniently forgetting the fact that he called her basically a traitorous whore and volunteered to kill Gerald before she left, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, I forgive you, welcome back," like
I can't stay mad at you.
yeah, but she makes it very clear to him that she's not interested in rejoining the family business, and he's like, "Well, then you shouldn't have come home. Why are you here if that's not what you're here for?"
Got a good
Which,
point.
like, fair. Like,
Yeah.
why would she come back? Like, obviously, she's gonna be pulled into this. Like, you don't just go to the city where your family is, like, the number
Yeah.
one crime boss and expect to just live as a civilian.
Your family owns this city, bro. What do you expect to just like, oh no, I'm not involved in that.
Yeah. It's just it's not gonna work.
I really like the way that the chapters we kind of hopscotch perspective characters.
Mhm.
Like it starts with Barrow in the restaurant, and then we meet Hilo, and then we follow Hilo to the estate, and we meet Lon, and then we follow Lon and meet Shay, and then we follow Shay to Hilo again, and then he goes to the academy, and we meet
Mhm.
Andon, and
Yeah. But I like, to that point, I love how it's done too, where it's like the chapters have interesting and, like, compelling names, and it's not
yeah,
like the character's name. This is this character's
right,
chapter.
and it's not like it is a perspective chapter,
Yeah.
but it's not the normal bog standard perspective stuff that we get in almost every goddamn fantasy novel every day. Like
Every
everybody's doing the Game of Thrones thing with like 18 goddamn different perspective characters and everybody gets their own chapter.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of it.
Me too. Like, The Expanse is so guilty of that to the point where, like, you don't even with Cibola Burn, it was like there were so many characters I didn't give a fuck about. Finally, Nemesis Games is only the 4 crew members of the Rocinante, and that's, I think, the first and only time that they do it, and that book is boring as fuck. So it's like, you get finally the perspectives that you care about, but they're not even together, and all of these people are like, "Ooh, this was great. It was a rich story. The characters were together, but you know they care about each other, and it was almost better that they weren't there." Wrong. Put them together, give me their perspectives, that's all I fucking care about,
I'm
and I love
convinced.
that this book does this without it being overt
Obvious.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
Like you know who the chapter belongs to. Like you know who the perspective character is,
Mhm.
but they aren't the main character.
No, and it's done even, like, compared to Six of Crows. It's done so much better in terms of, like, fleshing out the characters and their personal histories and their own traits instead of, like, Jesper who has guns and gambles all his money away, and
Yeah.
those are his
He
only
has a
personality
gambling
traits.
problem.
Yeah, like, you can tell Leigh Bardugo has, like, clear favorites, and, like,
Yeah.
like, Nina's chapters are, like, 58 pages long, and they're, like, rich with
Yeah.
description about, like, her, like, great tits and, like, sexual tension with Matthias, and
Just
then
don't
Jesper
have
has,
other
like
characters.
no, like,
Like,
if you have your faves, keep writing from that perspective, who cares? Like,
yeah, they can be side characters. The story is not enriched by another chapter with a name attached to the front of it.
no, like, this is done so much more tastefully, there's no clear favorites, every character has their own unique histories and motivations and traits, and it's just lovely to see.
It's true. But after Hilo leaves Shay, when he's basically like, all right, whatever, do whatever you're going to do. But you know, stay safe. This city's dangerous, in case you forgot.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the academy, which I forget the name of.
Call Doucheron Academy.
Right. And he wants to go check out the cream of the crop. We're introduced to Andon, who is a super promising. Like he's hella talented.
Yeah.
Uh, and also like a adopted cousin.
Yeah, he's Call Sen, who's Lon and Hilo and Shay's grandfather. He's an adopted grandson of him, basically.
Yeah,
Um, so he's kind of in the family by association, but he also grew up in the house. So
yeah.
he's been with this family since he was a child. Um, But we also meet this kid very briefly named Tone, who's in the middle of doing some drills, I think. But the only reason his perspective is important for the 2 seconds we get it is because you learn about all the different disciplines of training that Greenbones can harness through, like, judicious use of Jade and the powers it gives you. So there's strength, steel, perception, lightness, deflection, and channeling.
Right. I remember making a note about this that it seems like a really weird, like deconstructed version of the Avatar powers.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Like you kind of imbue an aspect of the thing in order to use it, but that's also not how it works at all. It's very confusing.
It is, like, they're all like, you could probably assign each one of those things to, like, the elements that Avatar
Yeah,
covers, but, like, steel is part of, like, earth bending, and, like, perception is part of water bending, like, strength is probably part of, like, earth or fire bending, like,
right.
there's a lot of different ways you could
But
categorize them,
like the
but
way
it's
that they described steel was they were doing an exercise where they had to punch a brick, which used super strength, but the brick was super hot, so you'd burn the fuck out of your hand if you tried to break it.
right.
So they had to imbue steel so that it would absorb the heat instead of burn them. And I'm like, that's a weird way to use steel, if we're being honest.
Yeah, and so it's like your true mastery comes from harnessing, like, 2 or more of those disciplines
Right.
with each action that you take.
Just kind of like going buck wild on your a la carte menu, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and then I think, like, this is glazed over, but I think it's hinted at that Andon is queer.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not glazed over. It's mentioned,
Okay.
it's like, and then explicitly he
Yeah,
likes
like
boys.
he's really looking at one of his classmates like, oh. And I'm like, good
Yeah,
for you,
'cause
buddy.
yeah. Because Hilo and Andon do, like, a little sparring, and Hilo is, like, unfairly advantaged, obviously, because he's way more experienced,
Yeah.
older, and is fucking decked out in jade, and then you don't get your jade until you graduate from the school,
Mhm.
so he does his best, and he comes away from that fight being like, "God, I really embarrassed myself," and Hilo's like, "You made me bleed, dude, like, you did a great job,"
Yeah.
and then they're having, like, a little heart to heart, and Andon is, like, very overly formal with him and, like, looking around being like, "Oh my god, I hope nobody looks at this and takes it the wrong way," and he's like, "You're like my little brother, dude, don't worry, like, are you worried that other people will know that you're into boys? I know that, by the way. Don't stress."
Yeah. We also get more in like we get a bit of and keep trying to call him Anders.
I keep wanting to call him Ander because of the Spanish show Elite that I got really into last year.
Andon kind of gives a little bit of backstory about his parents, and we find out that the line between badass and strung out junkie is razor thin
Yeah.
because she killed herself on accident.
Did she
She
kill herself?
used, yeah, she used a cheese grater on her arm because she had the itches and just turned her arm into hamburger meat.
Right. I don't think she died right away, but she died of her injuries, like, a few days later, I think. But
I think that still counts as killing yourself.
true, very true. But I was like I thought I was misremembering a conversation she had with Ander when he found her. Because she had, like, cheese grated all her skin off, and she's like, "I was too itchy to sleep." He's like, "Hello, 911?"
Yeah, I
I think he
paused it
called
for a
Lan
minute.
over. Mm.
I paused the audiobook for a minute just to let that one sink in. I was like, boy, oh boy, I've seen some terrible shit in my day, but
Yeah,
hamburger meat arms?
the way that it was described was very, like, intense.
Oof.
It was a lot.
So anyway, chapter 8. I don't think we missed anything from. It was a pretty quick chapter.
Uh,
It was just to introduce Andon.
yeah, and also the name of I have notes about the drug SN1 in this chapter.
Right, they do
So
mention SN1.
And I don't remember in what context, but
I think they were just kind of like saying, "Oh, well, you can take it to just kind of juice."
oh, right. Hilo was describing it to Andon in a way that was like, you can have he's like, "Do you need it?" Like, I can't remember why he kind of brought it up a little bit or something, and he was like, "Why? Like, do you need some drugs? Because like, if you're getting"
Yeah, I
he's
think
like,
he was
he
just
does the, like
worried. He was just worried that he wasn't going to be able to perform as well as he should. And he
right.
was like, "Don't worry, you're fine, dude. You're super buff and strong. And like, if worse comes to worse, we can get you the SM1, and you'll just be as good as new."
Yeah, and I guess it just gives people, like, the Jade vibes
Yeah,
without needing Jade, and then that like, people who aren't Kekonese can experience Jade-like sensations with this drug, SN1 and or Shine.
I thought it was
I think?
used. I thought it was used as like a way for people who are not Kekanese to use Jade.
Oh, that's right. That makes way more sense.
But if you were already able to use Jade, it just kind of like turns the volume up a little bit.
Right, okay, that makes way more sense.
And this next chapter, we get a little cultural lore building,
Mhm.
where apparently every year they have a thing called the Boat Day, where they purposely destroy boats to appease some god,
Mhm.
and we love destroying property to appease gods.
Always.
Especially when you're destroying smaller things that are shaped like the bigger things that they would have destroyed anyway to trick them. Oh, I love tricking gods. Look, see, we're doing a bunch of them. Doesn't that count as one big one, please?
Yeah, it's like what the Greeks used to do with sacrificing, like, animals and cooking meat, and they're like, "Oh, but the gods survive off the smoke of the meat, so we eat the meat afterwards."
Yeah, it's very like we're it, that's the kind of stuff that cultures do when they're sick of having to follow the rules and they're like, this still counts.
Yeah, why am I gonna waste a perfectly good ox?
And I had a hard time tracking the circumstances because Andon and his buddies are celebrating, so they're just wandering around, getting drunk, eating food, barfing up that food, drinking some more, and at some point, Andon just kind of like gets separated and appears in a restaurant owned, like affiliated with the Mountain Clan.
Yeah, he has to pee really, really bad, and he finds this hot fried bread place, and he goes in, uses the washroom, and comes out, and these other, like, teens are waiting outside being like, "Aren't you gonna buy some fucking bread, you rude bitch?" And then he realizes at that moment that he's not in no peak territory,
Right.
and, they're like, "You should probably fight us over this." Like, they're clearly looking for a fight, they know he's of a different clan,
Yeah,
but it's all because he had to pee really bad.
they want to impress, like they're essentially at the rival academy and they want to impress their superiors by like, oh, some punk came into our territory, but we beat him up. And
Mhm.
they start I think he starts the fight because it wouldn't look good for him if he didn't fight back.
Yeah.
So he decides to start it and throw the first punch. And actual like fingers and I think it was a couple fists and then the horn of the mountain turn up and
Mhm.
berates the boys. Like, man, what the fuck are you guys doing? Don't you know it's a holiday?
Yeah, and we find out the horn of the mountain clan, his name's Gaunt Ashentu, and he
Great
is
name.
like a giant bald man,
Yeah.
basically, and
Absolute
he's like
fucking badass. I love this guy.
yeah, and he's very conniving, and he, like, sees this opportunity, he knows who Andon is, and he starts, like, sizing him, he's like, "Oh, Hilo thinks of you like a little brother, doesn't he?" He's like, "Why don't don't you come over here? Get in my car. We're gonna go on a little drive.
Yeah.
And Andon's like, oh, I have to be home. Like, you
No,
probably
that's
shouldn't do
okay.
this.
Also, Andon has heard of this guy. And we
Yeah,
get a
because
little
he
backstory.
knows his name immediately.
And he explains a little bit of his backstory, and it's the dopest shit ever. Like, it involves him. I don't remember the exact details, but I know it involves something called a death of consequence, which is the dopest name for something. But it's basically just like ritual combat, where as many people as possible beat you to death, and this guy beat everyone else, so he didn't die.
Yeah, he's the only person who ever got out of it alive, and he's just covered in scars because of it.
But he takes Andon in a car ride over to the Ite estate to meet with
Madashi.
yeah, the pillar of the mountain. But I made a note because the way he talks to him in the car, it's like, do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior, the Mountain Clan?
Yeah,
It's very
fully.
recruiter, like Navy recruiter.
Yeah,
Hey,
because he
hey, what are you making these days?
yeah.
The army can beat that, man.
Yeah, because we know that Andon's mother's side of the family was very skilled and powerful, but also had a proclivity towards madness,
Right.
more or less. And he's like, your mother's family was all about wanting to unite all of the Greenbones under one clan. And the only reason your grandfather, like the only reason you are allied with the Calls is because like your grandfather just decided to do that. But like he could have just as easily chosen to join up with the Mountain Clan
Yeah.
and is like priming him for this conversation that he's about to have when he gets to the Mountain Clan home, basically.
Uh, Chapter 9 is when they get there,
Yeah.
and suddenly Andon becomes the most important boy.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he's there, and I can never tell what this guy's name is it Gaunt or Gom? Because it's pronounced
Gaunt.
both ways. I
It's
would stake my life on it.
it's Gont. That's how it's spelled.
Okay. But as soon as they're at the estate, Gaunt picks up the phone and calls Lon and it's like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, listen, we've got your boy. That's fine. But don't do anything rash, huh? Anyway, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, because he knows Hilo is gonna get
Yeah.
really aggressive about this. So he's like, don't
Keep your
make sure
dog on
Hilo
a
doesn't
leash.
get mad about this. We're
Yeah.
just gonna have a little chat. I'll give him back in 3 hours. But this chapter is called Skirting Aisho, which is something I don't know if we ever get a concrete definition for, but it seems to imply the kind of like tenuous respect and peace that
Yeah.
these clans have where they don't intentionally fuck with each other,
Right.
more or less.
It's
It's like a
essentially
truce, I
yeah,
think.
it's essentially a truce where they're like, you stay on your side, I'll stay on mine. Uh and we won't do anything to overtly start a war.
Mhm.
But really, I thought it was interesting because while the no peaks are running around with their like chickens with their heads cut off, uh, the Mountain Clan is just sitting there with a watch, like a couple of heisters timing police response times to see what they do in a situation like this.
Yeah, and, like, Lon starts panic calling everybody he knows because he knows Hilo loves getting really mad about stuff and has a special place in his heart for Andon. So Hilo finally calls back. He's like, "I'm at a payphone. I got 20 dudes outside Gaunt's apartment right now. Did you know they have Andon?" And Lon is like, "Please don't do anything. I know they have him." Um, But he tells Hilo not to do anything, hangs up the phone, and he does not like this, like, flagrant display of intimidation
Mm,
because there's, like, channels that like, respectful, proper channels to
right.
go through to have a conversation, and this is like, we don't know the extent of, like, the disrespect being applied here, but it's shady as fuck.
Yeah.
He's
Like you
like,
don't
"Cancel
just
my
take a
meeting."
member of the family up off the street and then take them home with you and then go, oh my gosh, why would you guys retaliate? This is crazy.
Yeah, we'll bring him back safe and sound in 3 hours. Chill, 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 chill.
Uh, but the mountain estate, or I guess the Ite, AYT,
Mhm.
sounds like he says Ike in the book.
Yeah.
Uh, is like a super traditional estate where the Call family home is pretty modern and bougie. The Ite estate is like super traditional.
Yeah, sprawling, one story, done in the traditional style.
Yeah, and he's taken in to see the Pillar, who he was expecting for some reason. I felt super called out by this because he was expecting to see like a hot femme fatale, but it was just a regular person. And I was like, okay, I was expecting the same thing. Yeah, I don't have to be treated this way. Because that's what it is all the time. Always the villain woman is a super babe. But she's just a regular
True.
woman.
She's just a lady. Um, and is kind of, like, observing the dynamic in this family, and he can immediately tell that this house also has tension between the Horn and the Weatherman, and, like, they're kind of, like, making these digs at each other, and he's about to meet the Pillar, but we get a bit more information about who Madashi is, and, like, how she's an adopted child of Ugantan, who was the former Pillar, and she was one of 3, and she became the Weatherman, and as soon as that happened, she starts quickly and publicly killing off her siblings and rivals to gain power, and people are surprised by this, not at the fact that she's doing it, but the fact that she's shamelessly doing it in public and, like, not apologizing for it and not
Yeah.
attempting to hide behind any type of, like, scheming and politicking.
Yeah. It's very straightforward. Like, these people are in my way towards my ascension, so they gotta go.
Yeah, and I think at one point she used, like, this universe's version of, like, the Dark Brotherhood, basically, where you, like, whisper a man's name to someone in particular, and then, like, days later, they just appear dead.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, their car exploded. That's so wild.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
But she sits him down and basically lays it out like, hey, look, we want to work with the No Peaks because we've got a great line on some SN1 manufacturing and distribution. We're expanding out into like bumfuck nowhere. I forget what the fake country's called, but even Andon was like, "That's nowhere,"
Ecotan? I don't even
something
know.
like that. And she's like, "We're expanding out there to start selling SN1, and we want you guys to get in on it. What
It's
do you
very weird.
say?" And he's like, this decision's kind of above my pay grade, so I'll take this message back to Lon, and he'll, give you a response."
Mhm.
And she's like, great, now please leave.
Yeah, but Andon, like, we get a sense of, like, how perceptive he is because he knows that what she's doing is giving, like, a very thinly veiled proposition to all of the calls that there's an open
Yeah,
position, basically, and he's, like, a messenger at the highest level.
right. He knows, like, he can tell by the way she's speaking to him. He's like, oh, right, this has nothing to do with me. I'm just the voice box to deliver this message.
Yeah, and then he's immediately like, "Oh, I'm gonna survive this encounter." So he does the thing that like I do in work meetings sometimes, where I have a very like particular point to make, but I don't want to look like a dickhead. So I'm like, I'm just gonna ask a question here. Like, I might be stupid. Like, maybe I'm not interpreting this properly, but like, why is this happening? Basically, because he knows he's gonna survive, so he just starts asking questions, and she's like, recognizes that
Yeah.
that's what he's doing.
It's a fun little tense conversation. And then he just kind of goes home. He gets dropped off and then immediately picked up and taken back to the call estate where they're like, "Tell me everything."
Yeah.
And this is some A plus politics in this chapter. I think it's chapter 11 because he, Andon is like, "Hey, they want to open up the trade and sale of this drug all over the world. They want you guys in on it." And that's it. And Lon was essentially like, "Okay, you can go." And they discuss it, and Hilo's like, "This is a trick. They just want to get us make us more weak, undermine us some more." And then Weatherman, whose name I forgot.
Doru?
Yeah, Doru. He's like, "I think this might be a good idea." And Hilo's like, "Are you crazy?" And Lon's like, "Well, okay, I think I've made a decision." And Doru's like, "Wait, wait, wait. What do you mean you've made a decision? It's only been like 4 minutes." And he's like, "I made a decision. Both of yours fucking sucked. So we're gonna do what I want to do." And Doru's like, I think it's, listen, let's really consider their offer here. Because I think what they're saying, they've got really great points. And I think this could work out for us in the end. And that's when I was like, okay, this guy's 100% in their pocket.
Hmm. Do you think he would betray
Yeah, because
like
his
Call
boss
Sen
isn't the
that way?
boss anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. But Lon and Andon have like a conversation kind of on their own first, without Hilo there because Hilo gets really upset about things very
Yeah, he's
easily
a real
and
hothead.
he is. He's like Andon is like apologizing for existing basically. He's like, "I'm so
Yeah.
sorry that I was there and that I had to get in the car and that I was out for boat day." And Lon's like, "It's okay. Like the Mountain Clan has
This
been looking
shit
for a
kind
way
of
to like
happens.
yeah, they've been looking for any excuse to shake us up for a while. You just gave them like an easy in, basically." But all of this conversation is revolving around the fact, like really hammering the point in that the Mountain Clan went about this in like an incredibly disrespectful way, went through all the wrong channels, didn't follow protocol, like flagrantly disrespectful. Hilo is warning Lon that like Gaunt is way craftier than he looks, which is evident from the interactions that he was having with Andon. Um, but yeah, Doru's opinion on it is like, well, like there's a demand for shine, and back in the day, like why shouldn't the Green Bones make a profit order over it? And like back in the day, monarchs would like trade kids to like
Right.
assure loyalty between powerful families.
Like,
And
the reason I feel like he's in the mountain pocket is because, like, he's not giving advice. He's trying to nudge Lon in the direction of what the mountain wants.
mhm.
He's not like, well, that is one option, and it is like a doable option. He's like, we should do this.
Yeah, but and so he's also coming at it from like a profit perspective too though. Cuz like if there's a demand, The
Right.
supply will find a way. And because he's always been kind of in charge of like the money side of the clan's business dealings, to me, it kind of made sense that he would want to push for this if there's money to be made.
Sure.
But
I don't trust him.
no, and I don't think we should because of the position he occupies.
Yeah.
But Lon is like, Hilo's very much like, fuck that. Let's start fucking with the Mountain Clan. And then Doru's like, no, we should do exactly what the Mountain Clan wants. And we kind of get to see like Lon in action between here and like the end of chapter 14 where we stopped. Is like we're getting to see more of like Lon's position as Pillar and how he actually composes himself and how he acts. And like he's doing a great job.
Yeah.
But he's like, send a message through the proper channels that we're not going to accept this alliance, but we're not going to stand in their way. We're just going to keep it
Yeah.
totally neutral, and that's it.
We're just gonna, you guys have fun. We'll keep an eye on the fort.
Yeah, he's like, we don't want to
Good luck in your endeavors.
Yeah, we're not going to participate in like the unsanctioned use of Jade. That goes against everything we believe in. It's not aligned with our brand values, basically.
Yeah.
And he tells Hilo at the end of the chapter, he's like, go have some people look after Shay. She's kind of like not doing a great job of being on her own. Just keep an eye on her. Hilo's like, fine.
And I think he also this could just be me materializing subtext out of thin air. But I think there was a suggestion that he's like, go make sure that Shay's okay. And also bolster your ranks a little bit. Like start making us look like we're tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's like, start kind of like doing that, but no bloodshed. Like, do not fuck with the Mountain Clan outright, but start like getting some information. Like, get your ducks in a row, learn what you can, but don't fuck with them.
Yeah. And I almost forgot. Like when another point of why we shouldn't trust Doru as far as we can spit at him is when he's talking about like, hey, this could work out for our benefit. Like we'll be flat with cash. Lon goes, yeah, maybe, or this could be some fucking ploy to undermine the legitimate Jade business.
Right.
Because it's all regulated through the JFA.
Right.
Yeah, the Jade.
The something Jade Alliance. Is it the Kekonese Jade Alliance?
Oh.
I don't know.
Wrote it down somewhere.
Same. Maybe. I actually may have just wrote it down as the Jade Alliance. Oh, the Kekon Jade Alliance. That's what it's called.
Right. And like, because they're in charge of making sure that they have like all of the Jade accounted for and also selling it off to other countries. And Lon is like, if they start selling this drug, that means it pulls the rug out from under our entire infrastructure.
Right.
And that's when Dora's like, well. And it's like, he should have known that, Mr. fucking Finance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
But anyway, with chapter 12, we get to see Barrow again.
Okay, this part broke my heart because Barrow's out here remembering having Jade. He misses it, but there's a moment where he talks about like seeing Sampa just trying to get on and live his best boy life.
Yeah, and he talks shit about him.
And he's like out being like a bike courier, and Barrow doesn't like that, so he slashes his tires, and Sampa loses his job over it. And I almost cried. I was so upset.
Yeah, he's a prick.
Like poor boy.
My only note for this whole chapter, it was only like 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But my note for this whole chapter is Barrow out here making big boy choices.
Yeah.
He's making some tough guy choices, huh?
Yeah.
Think you're tough?
I guess his, like, aunt's boyfriend tells him about a man named Mut? Mud?
Yeah, something like
Spelled
that.
Mudt.
But
Uh, and he fences stolen goods, but does, like, a little something else on the side, and he's like a shine dealer, basically, I think.
yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
and Barrow's like, I'm gonna go get a job with this guy because I'm tough and fuck everybody else.
I
I was
hope
like,
Sampa
okay,
kills
okay.
him.
I guess we're making big boy choices now.
I hope he
Did we
dies
forget that you
horribly.
got the living Christ kicked out of your asshole?
Yeah. I just want the best for Sampa. I feel so bad for this kid.
He committed a crime. He's criminal for life. No rehabilitation. I don't remember. Oh, right. The next chapter is another Shay chapter
Mhm.
where all of like the plot's starting to. The pot isn't boiling yet, but the little bubbles are starting to come up.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Like steam's starting to rise off the water. And while the water's starting to get a little warmer, Shay's off having herself a little meet cute.
Mhm.
She got herself an apartment, and there's a hot guy that lives a couple doors down, and she just can't find the time to talk to him.
Yeah, but she's like, "Oh, I'm not looking to meet anybody, like, I just broke up with Gerald, so
Gerald!
I shouldn't be meeting anybody right now."
Even though she goes out of her way to do so. She
Yeah,
is master and commander at going back on her word.
truly. But she's, like, coming up with a way to introduce herself to, like, cute neighbor boy, and then when she does finally introduce herself, she, like, doesn't use her full name. She
Right.
just says that she's Shay because she doesn't want anybody. Her reasoning for this is that she doesn't want anybody to, like, hear her name and be like, "Oh my god, you're of the Call clan, the No Peak clan." But instead of saying her name like she intended to with this particular interaction, she's like, "I'm just Shay." And she's like, "Oh my god, he must think I'm, like, an insufferable flirt."
Very cringe. Like, she speaks to him like a normal human being, and she's like, oh my god, he must think I'm an idiot. Or I'm
Yeah.
flirting with him. Oh my god, he must think I'm so foolish. And he's just like, alright, it was nice to meet you.
Mhm. Bye.
And then Lon comes over, and he
Yeah.
essentially tells her, like, hey, look, can you do something for me? I forget what it was he asked first.
He asked her to go to some the mines, I'm assuming jade mines,
Yeah,
to just basically check over the books and make sure everything is adding up the way that it's supposed to. Because I think he's doing this as a way to ensure that, like, the jade that they're mining is being properly accounted for. Just make
right,
sure that, like, I think it's just to make sure that everything is, like, lining up.
right.
Just trying to
We
get
want
their
to be in the black.
paperwork in order. Yeah, and I think because, like, knowing what he's about to go do, like, wants to make sure he has an accurate count on, like, the amount of jade that he has at his disposal.
Right.
It's like when you haven't been, like, time tracking properly and your boss is like, "So, like, how much time are you actually spending on, like, these activities?" You're like, "Oh,
Uh,
Jesus, I don't know, 6 hours on one thing?"
but he he's like, I know you said you wanted like, I know you said you wanted to be out, and I respect that, but can you do this for me? And she's like, yep,
No questions asked.
just instantly. There isn't even a moment where she's like, well, I don't know. I said I was out and I don't need their help. She was just like, yes, I will do this thing.
Yeah, she does some, like, mental gymnastics where she's, like, realizing that her brother could force her to pledge her allegiance to the family or be cut out forever, and he's not gonna do that. I think it's also, like, she has a lot of respect and gratitude, I think, towards Lon,
Mhm.
but also is probably looking for any reason to have an excuse to get back into the family business that isn't her seeking it out on her own. Like, this is a great
Yeah,
excuse for her to she's like, "Oh, I'm doing my brother a favor.
right.
I owe him
They
so
came to
much."
me.
Yeah, it's not me going back on my word. This is I didn't make this choice.
Yeah. And Lon is basically like, okay, great. Like, I got the feeling that he was like, I thought that was going to take a lot more convincing. But anyway,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, and he also is specifically going to her place so that Doru doesn't know that they're having this
Right.
conversation
Because
too, because
he doesn't like Doru anymore. Like, he didn't like
no,
him before, but now he's like, I don't trust this guy.
no.
I think that's it for chapter 13.
Mhm.
And chapter 14, Lon is off to go visit one of the members of, like, the Jade Authority Council.
Yeah, he's a chancellor of
Right.
something.
He's like the head of the JFA or KJA or whatever the fuck that abbreviation is.
Mhm.
And we get to see, like, Lon really flex his pillar muscles, and it's rad as hell.
Yeah, it's lovely to see.
He's like, okay, what would it take in order to change the law that means that no one can have a bigger stake in Jade than any other holding member? And he's like, well, I don't know about this. And he's like, okay, okay, okay. But let's talk for real, right? What would it take? And the guy's like, oh, well, I've got a list.
Mhm.
And he brings out, it's not a literal list. He just says a lot of things that he's like, well, you could do this, that, and the other thing. And Lon's like, I could, but let's be real. That's not our department. Well, let's start working on this. And he's like, sure, okay. Like,
Mhm.
oh my god, yes. This is the kind of shit I live for. He's basically getting
Yeah.
it for free.
Yeah, and he also at the same time is, like, vetting the qualifications of the person he wants to replace Doru with. He brings him along, and he's like, "Before we go into this meeting, this chancellor is gonna want something from us. What do you think he's gonna ask?" And, like, kind of tasks him to come up with the solution and see, like, if the suggestion that he makes is of the, like, standards and quality that he's hoping to get out of his next weatherman, and it seems like this guy performs admirably, so he kind of gets 2 things accomplished in this meeting where he's both manipulating the chancellor into giving him what he wants, and then also doing some on-the-job training.
Yeah. And I think my favorite vibe from this whole chapter is like the combination between this chapter and the one where they were discussing what they were going to do about the mountain's plan is that everybody was like, or Hilo was like, we should fight them because that's all poor boy knows.
Mhm.
And Dora was like, we should do whatever they say because they pay me, allegedly, speculatively. And Lon was like, I know what we're going to do. And it turns out what his plan is to send them a note that's like, yep, you guys have fun in your endeavors, and good luck. And then as soon as they turn around, he tells his team, we're going to fuck them in the ass.
Mhm.
And ooh, this is the kind of politics stuff that I live for, dude. I love treachery.
Mhm.
And
Um,
that's it.
well, we get kind of a memory moment that's not crazy important, but worth mention, where Lon is remembering a time where his dad was at home and kind of telling
Oh, yeah.
him a parable about like why gold and jade symbolically can never go together. Gold being symbolic of like the ruling members of like kings or politicians or like why they shouldn't be the people in like public power because like when Lana and Hilo were growing up, like there was a rebellion and a war happening that ended when they were children. And so his dad had a very different perspective on the state of the world and like why Greenbones are meant to be warriors and united under one clan and like doing all this from like being out in the open and kind of being like champions of the people and not the ruling class because I don't know, of like corruption or some shit. Like it's
Right.
too much and too vulnerable for one person to be in possession of all of these things. But the way that the Green Bones have evolved since the ending of this rebellion is that they're kind of subtly influencing all of these things through meetings with the chancellors and trying to figure out the best way to get what they want out of it.
Yeah.
And having like the Lantern Men be like their business associates and like kind of taking over the city from a few like steps removed, basically.
Right. Like any good criminal organization.
Mhm. But
But
yeah,
that's
that's
all
about it.
that's all the chapters we read this time, boys and girls. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with 14 more.
Mhm.
Boy oh boy, I'm enjoying the hell out of this book. It's real good.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it too.
But we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thanks for hanging out, stopping by. Bye, everybody.
Farewell.